Well, hello and welcome to the daily Monday morning video post. Um, if you've been following the daily for any amount of time, you'll realize that I am not Ryan Paulson. This is Yvonne Biel, and I am stepping in for Scott Winnig and discussing a little bit of his passage on Matthew 15:21 through 28. So today, as we look at this passage of Jesus, the disciples, and a Canaanite woman, you may realize that this is actually a passage that has caused a lot of controversy in the past, depending on how you read this passage. So today's video is to show you just a little bit of how we handle text that we read in the scriptures, maybe when they're surprising or they seem a little out of character, and how we can navigate those types of texts. So here we are in Matthew 21 through 28, and we'll notice that Jesus is going away, he's withdrawing, and to a foreign region. And there he's met with this Canaanite woman who calls him the son of David and requests that her daughter be healed because she's been oppressed by a demon. And Jesus, in his response, seems a bit surprising when it says that he did not answer her a word. Wow, that at first that seems like Jesus may be a little bit harsh, or like either he's ignoring her or something else is happening. So that's kind of confusing. And then we get to the place where the disciples also are pushing her away. Send her away. She's crying out after us, they say. And Jesus then responds with something rather strange. We haven't heard this necessarily many times from him, but he does say that he's sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And so that's a little startling for us who feel like, oh my gosh, Jesus has come for all of us. And why would he say that he comes only to the lost sheep of Israel? Isn't that not true? And then she comes back to him and says, Lord, help me. And he responds yet again with something rather odd. He says it's not right to take the children's bread and to throw it to the dogs. Here's where Jesus comes across as maybe a little bit harsh, maybe a little bit racist, if he's for the Jews and feeling like there's tension with other people that are not Jews, and then he's calling her a dog. That seems to be rather harsh and rather surprising of his character. And then in the end, when she responds to Jesus, he calls her a woman of great faith, and that then her daughter's healed instantly. So this passage brings up a lot of questions if we're not careful with how we read it. So the first thing that I'd like us to remember when we are reading texts like this, or we come across instances where Jesus maybe surprises us, or the situation seems to be a little odd, I think it's really important that we understand the context. So I want to take you to a few passages earlier in Matthew. This is Matthew 8 and 9. And so at the very beginning of the passage, Jesus is quoting this wisdom of the Old Testament and saying that these people are honoring him with their lips, but their hearts are far from him. So he's creating this contrast of what's happening with people's from their words is not always what's happening in their heart. And again, I know this is a little bit hard to see, but this is verses 17 and 18. He's creating the same type of conversation, the same type of contrast, where he says, what comes out from what comes out from the mouth proceeds from the heart. And this is what really tells you what's inside the person's heart. What is coming out of the mouth is proceeding from their heart. And so Jesus is looking in the context, or even as Matthew is writing this gospel, his context wants us to pay attention to what's coming out of their mouth versus what's really truly in their heart. So as we get into this passage, we'll notice that there's actually multiple characters here. It's not just an instance of Jesus being there, but the Canaanite woman is present and also the disciples. And so it is really important that we notice all the different characters that are there, and we realize that this story is not just a one-off story. This has been building for the whole first 15 chapters of the book of Matthew. So Matthew's already established some things about the character of Jesus, about the character of those who are not Jews and of those who are following Jesus. So we must pay attention to the characters in the context. And lastly, here we are, and we're noticing that the disciples actually do have a response to this woman's request, and that is to send her away, for she is crying out after us. So here's what the disciples are saying, but check out what she's saying. Here's this woman coming to Jesus and saying, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David." And she knows that her daughter is oppressed, and she's coming to Jesus for mercy, coming to him as a master, coming to him knowing who he is as the Son of David. That means that he's the Messiah. So there is a lot of information that this little, even this little tiny passage tells us about what she knows about Jesus. And then, she doesn't get a response, but she still cries out, and she continues to ask for help. And here she is, even as she's called a dog, she calls him Lord and says, "That's fine." Even the dogs eat the crumbs, and still wants to partake in what this man has to offer her. So what a difference in the contrast of how the disciples just want her to go away, with what the woman is saying here. So in the end, what Jesus is doing is setting up a situation where this woman's heart is coming out through the words that she says, in contrast to the words that are coming out of the disciples' mouth, coming out from their heart of not really understanding the truth of and the good news that Jesus brings to them as the lost sheep of Israel. So he's really setting up a high contrast that even the people of Israel, the chosen ones that Jesus is coming after, are not really getting it in their heart. And this has always been the way of Jesus. God has always chosen certain individuals to set them apart so that he could save the whole. And here in this story, Jesus is using the Canaanite woman to be the one that is set apart by her great faith. I love that. Great is your faith, he says. And by the healing of her daughter, Jesus is actually reversing the scenario and making the Canaanite woman, the Gentile woman, the one who could be known as the least. He's actually setting her apart to teach the disciples a lesson. So what a cool flip of a story. What a great truth that we have when we understand who Jesus is, and that we can speak that out of our heart, and that Jesus knows and can actually just praise our faith and use our faith to be the set apart ones so that more of the world can know who he is. So just a reminder in conclusion, make sure that we are looking at the context, make sure that we're looking at the characters. Also in this instance, I'm going to add the culture of the woman and the foreigner versus what was happening with the disciples at that time. And so really, as we go to Jesus, I think our approach is one of praise, knowing who he is, one of persistence, continuing to ask him what we desire, being willing to do that because of his love for us. And the last bit is that our posture remain that of humble, continuing to treat Jesus as Lord and to come to him with great faith. I think this woman teaches us a lot about how we can approach Jesus and how faith truly comes out of our heart and out through our mouth. So that's our video teaching for today. I hope it's been beneficial for you. Feel free to respond and let us know that it is. Have a great day.